Have you ever said yes to something, even though you knew you should have said no? Maybe someone asked for a favor. Maybe someone asked for your time. Maybe someone simply assumed you would help. And in that moment, you hesitated. One part of your mind thought, I really don't have time for this. But another part thought something different. If I say no, this might become awkward. So you said yes. But later, something inside you started to feel heavy. Maybe a little frustration. Maybe tiredness. Maybe that uncomfortable feeling that, once again, you put someone else before yourself. And the interesting thing is that many people who go through this are seen in a very specific way. They are seen as kind, reliable, always willing to help. But psychology shows that behind this behavior, there is often a silent conflict happening inside the mind. And when this pattern repeats many times, it can start to weigh on a person. So the question is, why do some people struggle so much to say no? And what actually happens inside the mind when someone feels the need to say yes to everything? Some people have a very hard time saying no. If someone asks for help, they help. If someone asks for a favor, they agree. And many times, the answer comes almost automatically. Yes. Interestingly, these people are often seen in a very positive way. They are considered kind, helpful, reliable, the kind of person everyone knows they can count on. But what almost no one notices is that inside, many of these people are living a constant conflict. Because saying yes all the time may look like something good from the outside, but on the inside, it often doesn't feel like freedom. Very often, it feels like weight. A silent weight. The kind of weight that appears after the conversation ends. When the person realizes that, once again, they agreed to something they didn't really want. People who struggle to say no often experience something very specific. The moment someone makes a request, two forces appear inside the mind. One part of the mind thinks, I really don't have time for this. But another part thinks, if I refuse, how will this person react? Maybe they will feel upset. Maybe they will think I'm selfish. Or maybe the situation will become awkward. And suddenly, a small conflict begins inside the mind. On one side, the need to protect your own time. On the other, the desire to avoid any discomfort in the relationship. All of this happens very quickly. But in those few seconds, the brain has to make a decision. And most of the time, it chooses the path that feels easier in that moment. To say yes. Because saying yes solves the problem immediately. There is no discussion. No awkward moment. Everything stays peaceful. At least for that moment. But what many people don't realize is that the real weight of that decision almost always appears later. After the conversation ends, something begins to happen. A feeling slowly appears. First, tiredness. Then frustration. Sometimes even a little anger. Not necessarily toward the other person, but toward the situation. Because deep down, the person knows something important. They accepted something they didn't really want. And this is the moment when many people start to think, why do I keep doing this to myself? And along with that thought, another feeling begins to appear. The feeling of always giving in, always making space for others, while little by little, their own energy is being consumed. Over time, this can create something even harder to admit. The feeling of being taken advantage of, even if no one actually forced anything. This happens because a pattern slowly begins to form. The person is always available, always saying yes. And when someone becomes the person who always accepts, others begin to expect it. Not necessarily out of bad intentions, but because that behavior repeats so many times that it almost becomes a rule. And this is how many people end up trapped in a cycle. They say yes to avoid discomfort, but later they feel the weight of that decision. And the more this happens, the harder it feels to break the pattern. Because a new fear begins to appear. The fear that if they start saying no now, People might find it strange, or even pull away. And that fear explains one of the deepest reasons behind this behavior: the fear of disappointing others. One of the deepest reasons behind this behavior is the fear of disappointing others. For some people, saying no can feel like something negative, like being selfish, like being inconsiderate, or even like rejecting someone. So over time, the brain learns something very simple. Keeping the harmony feels safer, even if that means ignoring your own needs. But here is something interesting. Many people who struggle to say no are not weak. In fact, many of them are highly empathetic. They notice how other people feel. They sense tension in a conversation, and their mind automatically tries to keep the situation comfortable, which means that what looks like people-pleasing on the outside is often a strong social awareness on the inside. But when that awareness has no boundaries, it can slowly turn into exhaustion. And the more a person repeats this behavior, the more automatic it becomes. Saying yes starts to feel like a reflex, even when, deep down, they wish they had said no. Helping others is something natural, and many times, it's something positive. But when someone says yes to everything, the people around them start to notice. Over time, the requests become more frequent. More tasks appear. More favors are expected. Not necessarily because people want to take advantage, but because they have learned something that this person will rarely refuse. And this is the moment when many people begin to feel something difficult to admit: the feeling of always being available, but rarely protecting their own time. Psychologists often explain that boundaries are a learned skill. Not everyone learns this naturally. Some people grow up believing that saying no is impolite, or a sign of disrespect. So later in life, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable, or even wrong. But boundaries are not a way to push people away. In reality, they are a way to protect your time, your energy, and your balance. And when someone never establishes those boundaries, the brain slowly begins to treat their time as something that is always available. But here is something important that many people only realize over time. Saying yes to everything does not create healthier relationships. In fact, it often creates unbalanced ones. Because when someone never says no, other people stop noticing where the limits should be. Learning to say no does not mean being a difficult person. It does not mean being rude. Most of the time, it simply means recognizing something very simple. Your time has value. Your energy has limits. And your needs matter too. Because when someone says yes to everything, very often, they end up saying no to themselves.